As you can see from the title, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, this game just really sucks. It's the worst X game by far, and that's saying something because I just went through X6 last video, a game that I thought was awful. I usually go into the development history at the beginning, but I think that's better suited for later in the video, so let's get right in right now. But to be fair, let's do what I did last video and talk about stuff I like first. In this game, the part system acts more like a skill tree than upgrades found in stages. When you beat a stage, you get the option to choose which stat you'd like to upgrade. The thing is, unless you go all in with one character, it's unlikely that you'll be able to fill all 16 slots. You can create a lot of interesting builds, which on paper will lead to a lot of replayability. It all centers around on what character you're upgrading and what you want that character to accomplish. Speaking of characters, the Maverick Hunter duo is now a trio with the addition of Axel. And personally, I quite like the guy. He's very impulsive and immature at first, but he still very much wants to do the right thing, which to me is very endearing. I do think he's kind of annoying at the beginning, but when the entire main cast is all business, I think making an outlier is welcome. And finally, I think this game's soundtrack has to be one of the best in the series. This game's soundtrack is a lot more synthy, which the series' modern releases seem to follow up on. And yeah, that's it. Now let's get to the stuff most people are coming to this video for. This game is the first and only 3D Mega Man X game. And the reason why it's the only one is because it didn't really work at all in this game. As of right now, I'm not really a game designer and I'm not really planning on going into the field. But from what I understand, when you're translating a gaming franchise from 2D to 3D, you will have to go back on the drawing board on a lot of concepts. For example, with Mario, it was previously about just getting to the end of a level. And because of that, stages would just reuse assets as much as they could. But for 3D, it's a lot more time consuming to model stage geometry opposed to drawing it. So they conclude that it's less time consuming to just have an open area where you accomplish different objectives. This game very much tries to directly translate the Mega Man X formula into 3D. I mean, for a lot of this game, they really just plop a 2D stage and make it so that you can move in all 360 directions. It's not all the 3D sections, sure, but a lot of them just fall flat because what works in 2D doesn't translate well to 3D. Unless you need item pickups or it's required to advance, there's no reason to fight enemies in this game. But enough about the stages for now, because you know, even if a Mega Man X game is lacking, the characters are at least fun to play. Even X6 didn't mess this up, so that must mean we're good here, right? Right? Yeah, well, that one thing that made the game so fun in the first place sucks in this game. When once characters felt swift and fast, now they feel clunky and slow. In the previous games, even the classic games, when you get hit, you stumble back a bit. But in this game, you entirely fall over. When dash jumping was wide but a faster way to climb walls, in this game, it's only wide and you'll climb up that wall eventually, but it's much slower than just climbing it normally. And what's not helping is that the animations look really limp and slow. Now, we already established that this game fails on the basis that the characters aren't fun to play in the slightest. But hey, maybe if we change the characters, maybe the game could be fun? Problem is, the stages aren't very exciting. And honestly, it goes back to that whole just plopping of 2D stage and 3D design philosophy I mentioned earlier. I already brought up how a lot of enemies are just a non-threat because you can just walk past them. In other games, there's a lot of cool set pieces and stage themes that set other levels apart from each other. Heck, it even separated the bad stages from the truly awful ones. A lot of these stages besides Wind Clover Rain just kinda blend together for me. Like how Sonic games are made today, this game has a blend of 3D and 2D. But unlike Sonic games, the actual 3D parts are way worse than 2D. The characters feeling like 100,000-pound tanks applies to both sections. But it feels way worse in 3D because the 3D sections tend to be way longer than the 2D ones. But even with that, you can just bum rush through the stage anyways. And when the game does try to have its own gimmicks, it often just falls very flat. In Vanishing Gongaroo stage, you can hop into ride armors, and while in previous games it was just a neat little boost here, since everything else is clunky feeling, this is very, very clunky feeling. In Splash Wirefly stage, it's very barren and doesn't really do anything interesting. In Flame Higher stage feels like a lava version of Splash Wirefly stage. Ride Bursky is a ride chaser stage, which at the very least makes it more unique. There's a timer which makes it somewhat more interesting, but it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Plus, actually controlling the ride chaser is pretty abysmal, especially when you're trying to get all the rescuable Reploids and the items in this stage. The playing section of Wind Crow Rings can get pretty annoying, especially because this level has some weird wind resistance. Even when you're inside this helicarrier, you have to contend with this awful camera, so it's not really fun there either. Snipe Anteater is mainly fine, but if you don't bring Axel, there's really not much to do here. And to me, Tornado Tunyon's level is easily the worst in the game. It's basically trying to do the stair section from X4, but just making it into an entire level. In X4, there was the novelty that they made this work with 2D sprites. It was a short 30-second bit of a 3-minute stage filled with what I thought was its super interesting platforming. But here it goes on for 4 minutes with a mini-boss that can just take forever, with an actual boss that takes forever. The novelty of climbing up a large staircase is also lost when you see that it's fully modeled. Which, yeah, modeling this giant tower is a lot too, but it's just less impressive than what they did in X4. On the flip side, Soldier Stone Kong's level is probably the best level in the game to me, but it's just pretty okay. By far it has the best flow of any of the levels, and platforming with the Stoneheads is, dare I say, kinda fun. And I actually think the item placements are actually a little better here than in X6 at least. I mean, most of the locations are still out in the open, but the rescuable Reploids are in some cool places. They make use of Axel's copy shot, which can transform you into enemies. To be honest, I wouldn't recommend using this mechanic too often. The enemies somehow play worse than Axel does usually, but if you're just using them to get items, they aren't too bad. So while the level roster isn't as bad as X6, to be honest, some of these levels are just so boring to the point I'd rather just play X6's stages. When you fix the controls, you have snooze fest stages, but you only fix the stages and you still have the garbage controls. To me, the only way to really save this game is just rebuilding it from the ground up. While we're at it, I guess I'll also tear the bosses a new one too. All of these can be cheesed by all 3 characters. The G-Launcher for Axel, Zero's Raijin Show, and X's regular charge shot and the explosion weapon are the fastest ways to kill bosses. They can be even faster than using weaknesses, believe it or not. And I mean, sure, I could just not use them, but they're not that much harder, so yeah, just stick to melting their health bars. Most of the attacks are pretty easy to dodge, and they don't really do much that's interesting. Besides Vanishing Gangaroo, who's annoying because he's constantly jumping out of frame. And you can't have the camera lock onto bosses, so you have to constantly change the camera to where they are. Which, in any other boss, isn't really a problem, because either the camera is placed in a way where you can see all of the stage, or you're in a much smaller arena anyways. Couple that with the fact that you can just jump off of walls and it doesn't really become a fun fight. Abrupt transition, I know, but I'd figure I'd talk about the story in this game, because even though it's just okay, it's one of the better things in this game. Since the events from X6, people have severely lost faith in the Maverick Hunters. So much so, a much more violent version of the Maverick Hunters, Red Alert, have spawned to handle things in the rising Maverick crimes. One such member is Axel, who, by using his copy shot, can change his appearance to any Reploid, just so long as they're the same size. He was with Red Alert, but as they increasingly became more violent, Axel decided to leave. That's when he runs into Zero, who takes him into custody. Since Axel is so useful to Red Alert, they challenge the Maverick Hunters to take down 8 Mavericks. I actually think this is a good premise, especially with people losing faith in the Maverick Hunters, and that transitioning into Red Alert. Kinda reminds me of Superman vs. the Fatal 5, which if you haven't seen it is a fantastic movie and you should watch it. The Maverick Hunters have always been portrayed as the almighty force of good. And when I mean the Maverick Hunters, I mean X and Zero, but you get my point. So hearing that since the events of X6 they've been looked in a less than favorable light, it's probably gonna be interesting to explore. But who am I kidding, it's a Mega Man game, so there must be missed potential here. Before someone types in my comments, I get that story in these games mainly just exists as decoration for the gameplay, but that just makes it strange to me because we have X4, X6, and the entirety of the Zero series, where for all their flaws, they tell stories that I'd say are good, some are even great. As for Red Alert, I've been using they for the group considering Rotoad is a group, but really it's just Red, who I guess is their leader. After getting into individual characters, I'll just say that besides Zero and Axel, everyone else might as well be a non-entity. Ailey has gone back to just trying to bother you 20 times a stage, and Cygnus is just as unnecessary as ever. Like I said earlier, while some people may find him annoying, I really do like Axel. To me, even in his more fanboyish moments, they always reel it back into it being more endearing than annoying. Zero, while maybe being too frowny, I do think he plays off of Axel well. And I enjoy how he understands and even empathizes with Axel. But just like Classic 8 and X4, there's the voice acting. While being bad isn't actually that bad compared to the other two games. And while this might sound strange, it makes it kinda disappointing for me. For mostly everyone, they're just either okay or just bad. I think Axel and Zero probably have the best performances out of the cast. Axel can be a little grating sometimes, but is mostly fine. And while I don't entirely think Zero's voice matches the character, I do think it's very funny how bored he sounds. And while playing this game, trust me Zero, I can very much relate. However, this entire video I have been tippy-toeing around one major character, someone who's on the box. That being X himself, who in this game is very mixed when it comes to reception. X decides to retire because he's tired of all the fighting. Now you hear a lot of complaints of this decision and a lot of it is warranted. X's character is very consistent in every game from X1 to X6, including the extreme games. The thing that made his character admirable, at least to me, is that he hates fighting, but he hates injustice even more, so he'll never hesitate to stop Mavericks, even when he doesn't want to. On that level, yes, him retiring is a major misstep. But if there was another inciting incident, I can see this making sense. But X in the actual game itself is just really annoying. He's constantly complaining and whining about how Zero and Axel are succumbing to violence. Meanwhile, he's just on the couch just watching everything play out. Until he just decides to fight too. X sucks in this game and is not helped by his voice acting. Him sounding like an old man yelling at kids in his lawn.
How can you say that? If we fight, we'll fall right into their hands. We can't allow this madness to continue. That's quite enough. You need to back off and pay the dues for your crimes. Are you mad? You have no business as a hunter.
Although it is funny because X is the only example of the X4 dub situation, where his voice is so bad that it loops back into being amazing. That's pretty much it when it comes to story. It's not bad, but it's not good, at least comparing it to last time. Getting back into the gameplay a bit, we have the castle stages. Which, yeah, the endgame of Mega Man games are usually the weakest part to me, and this game is no different. You know that we're already at an awesome start where we get chased by a tractor for like 4 minutes. Then there's the gauntlet that is Sigma Stage 2, which is basically 3 stages in one. And honestly, if I could summarize X7 with one stage, this would be it. Bullet sponge enemy rooms, slow 2D sections that don't feel satisfying in the slightest, janky 3D sections, and the boss rush is back, so you've got to fight these awfully designed bosses a second time. Red's boss isn't very great considering this whole fight is just playing peekaboo with a bottomless pit under you. And when he's vulnerable, just use the same 3 techniques that you use to annihilate the other bosses and he's done. Then you get to this weird falling elevator, and alas, the final boss is no other than Sigma. For the 9th time in a row now. Yeah, I've been saving it for this game. At this point, Sigma's character is just a joke. He's literally only put into these games because the developers can't think of another way to finish a game. And the worst part is that they keep on designing new characters with cool designs and sometimes cool backstories, and then they just have them die playing second fiddle to Sigma. And that is worse is what is like in X6 and especially X3, where Doppler and Gate go, by the way, I brought back Sigma. Maybe bringing back Sigma would be cool if it wasn't every single game, but it is, so it's just tiring at this point. It also just diminishes Sigma as a threat at this point. Why would I take him seriously the 9th time when we've beaten him 8 other times already? especially when his plan in this game is to put Red Alert and the Maverick Hunters against each other. But the last time he tried that, he failed. And I don't just mean it's similar with different steps, it's like the same plan. Only this time he's aiming to get Axel for his copy ability. And just for cherry on top of me not being able to take Sigma seriously anymore, he sounds like Dr. Claw from Inspector Gadget.
That's right, folks. I'll do it again and again. I will make X and Zero mine. Now come and get me. Give me a good fight, like you always do.
Next time, Gadget. I promise I'll get you next time.
Also, another weird thing is that we climb this giant tower in the middle of nowhere, then get teleported to a random falling elevator which Sigma is in for some reason, and that falling elevator takes us to space? I mean, I guess this game just had the Jacob elevator before it was a plot point, because if it's not that, I don't know what this is. Which, speaking of us being in space, the second fight isn't very good. The first phase is actually kind of fun with him constantly teleporting around the place and shooting giant lasers. The second phase is just fine, I guess. At this point, it's just a typical giant Sigma boss at this point. He sends out projectiles and has some type of physical move. Although, if you bring Zero here, you can beat this boss very easily. So yeah, as a whole, this stage was pretty awful. But like the previous two games, there are different endings. Which means I suffered through this level 3 times for this video. And in hindsight, it really wasn't worth it. X's and Axel's are pretty similar, but the topic of Axel being a Maverick Hunter gets brought up, but X shoots it down. And Zero's is another tease for the Zero series, which I'm not sure why they still try to bridge the two. I mean, every single time they've tried that, a new game just comes along and ends up pushing it back, or it just completely undoes it. But with the game finally being finished, this game is just really bad, plain and simple. Heck, I could have just left it at the very beginning sentence of the video if I really wanted to. Opposed to X6, where I thought some aspects of it worked, in this game almost nothing works besides Axel as a character, and the music. Character controls, absolutely butchered. Level design, in most cases, is very boring. Voice acting, it's bad, which isn't new for this series, but it lacks the charm that X4 and Mega Man 8 had. The graphics weren't even that impressive, because on launch, the PS2 had way more impressive looking games. This game is so just not very good to the point I can't really see how someone could like it, to be honest. Well, if you do like this game, feel free to share why in the comments. Personally, after playing the game for the video, I'm not planning on touching this game anytime soon. Luckily, or unluckily, the next video is Mega Man X Command Mission, the RPG that was forgotten. I've never played the game before, so hopefully it acts as a palate cleanser after doing X6 and X7 back to back. With all that out of the way, I'll see you guys next time.